Oh, can't wait to join my first FF14 dungeon. It's going to be epic. Look at this dude. What's going on? You probably don't even know about tank stance, eh? How about limit break? Challenge log? Why are you so bad at this game? You don't pay my sub. I'm going to play the game however I want. Is Final Fantasy XIV a beginner-friendly game? Throughout my journey, this question has always existed in my mind, and today I'm going to share my thoughts on this subject matter with you, for the game is attracting an increasingly large player base. This is a question that I feel like it is in my power to share some opinions with, because it was not too long ago since I completed my first year of Final Fantasy XIV. And if you have not watched my 1-year recap video, then just know that I have completed a lot of things. And prior to Final Fantasy XIV, I have close to zero MMORPG experience, while I have only played a Chinese mobile ripped off version of WoW when I was a kid. 28 hours of D2 because my buddy really wanted me to play, and 2.7 hours of BDO. Which is a great segue to a quick definition of beginner. When I say the term beginner, I don't mean beginners who have experience with MMORPG from other games, just not FF14, but people who have literally never played the genre before. Maybe a bit RPG, but never MMO. In this video, I will give you 3 reasons as to why FF14 is beginner friendly, and then 3 reasons as to why it is not. And finally, I'll give you my conclusion section and a definition in terms of time span for beginner. Let us just set it to level 1 to level 50. It does not mean that after level 50 you are instantly a veteran. You are still new, but at least not a total stranger to the game anymore. There is a lot more you can learn, but you have learned the basics of the basics. Starting with the positive sides of things, the number 1 reason for FF14 to be beginner friendly is the pace of the game, especially early on. The game starts off slow, like really slow compared to other games that I'm used to playing, which are mainly RPG games. While this may seem like a negative point, but retroactively speaking, this was a necessity that I actually really appreciated. It felt like the game truly understood the fact that not all new players had played an MMO before, so it really took its time to slowly but surely introduce mechanics after mechanics to players. At first, it felt like every 5 steps you take, there will be a guide window that pops up which may explain new concepts that the players are being introduced to. And once a mechanic is introduced, a player is asked to practice that mechanic almost immediately and repeatedly. Such a pace enables players as dumb as me to get a sense of, oh okay, I know what I'm doing, and feel a progressive sense of accomplishment when I am being thrown into a situation where I can practice the skill that I just learned like 5 minutes or an hour ago. To me, this pace allowed for really any players to at least be comfortable with the beginning part of the game. This pace also goes with the story as well. You start with a few fetch quests here and there that you are really not sure why in the hell that you are the only person capable enough to do these tasks, and gradually introduce you to harder concepts after concepts. FF14 really feels like reading a 1000-page book that gradually unfolds its plot to you. Even the most insignificant details in the early game could be used later on in the game to be turned into something magnificent. Building off that slow-paced introduction, we got the leveling system. Now again, I have not played the other MMO to an extensive degree, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I feel like FF14's leveling system was near if not perfect, especially towards the end, when you only have 1 or maybe just a couple more jobs. You start with a few abilities that you don't really even need to think about to execute, and gradually add more skills to your repertoire, just like how the game introduces essential mechanics to new players at the start. If my memory has not degraded that badly from all the extensive farmings that I put myself through, then level 1 to 50 adds skills relatively faster, and after that it was usually 1 skill after every 2 to 3 levels. This system guarantees practice times for the players once they learn a new skill, and would ingrain that specific muscle memory related to that skill to the player's brain. And before they get bored, another skill is being thrown at them. Now, are there problems with this leveling system? For instance, if you're leveling another job after your main job after you've done the main scenario quest? Well, yes, because things can get a bit more complicated or a little bit too repetitive or even not intuitive enough in terms of allowing you to use the newest abilities that you have unlocked with, especially if you're leveling strictly through daily roulette like what I did with Dark Knight. It was not a fond memory, to be honest, and I would highly not recommend it. At least mix things up a little. But I also don't think these will be too much of a problem for beginners, at least according to this video's definition of beginner, since a beginner wouldn't have unlocked so many dungeons, and the ones that you have unlocked with are most likely near your level. And the main leveling method, at least for the job that you eventually stick around to, is the MSQ progression. Could the game throw the entirety of its combos at the player, or more flashy combos at the player's faces? It could, but personally speaking, it would have made the game, at least mechanically speaking, not really beginner friendly. Using BDO as an example here, while I was still using my 1-2-3 combos in FF14 during my first 2 hours, BDO has already introduced an extremely intricate battle system to me, and that system, while it was really cool, burned my monkey brain and made me uninstall the game. Am I just bad at that game? Perhaps, but let me just say that at least for me, introducing a battle system without any builds up in terms of skills is just adding unnecessary learning curve for the new players. Coming off onto number 3, we got beginner friendly tools. Straight out of the gate, new players are being introduced to various tools that may be able to help them on their journey. That pops up on the screen that details on each newly introduced mechanics, the link to the new player guide's website, Novice Hall, among many others. Among all these tools, I would say unironically the Novice Hall helped me the most. It did not necessarily help me when I was playing as a Dragoon or a DPS class, since DPS class in my opinion is pretty straightforward. You go in there, you follow the tank, and you deal damage while trying not to get killed by the ads of the bosses. I really benefited from the Novice Hall when I picked up Dark Knight, or a tank. Tanking in MMORPG, while it is extremely fun, also requires knowledge not only to the game but also the specific content that you are doing and perhaps a little bit of the genre in general. The most important thing that I took away from the Novice Hall was probably just the tank stance. Just this was enough to save me the embarrassment of running into dungeons like an idiot without having the thing on and cause group wipes. Was the Novice Hall tutorial perfect? Absolutely not. But going through its tutorials plus watching 10 guides gave me a comprehensive enough understanding toward my role in a dungeon or a raid to actually start playing as a tank with a little bit of confidence. I would imagine the same benefit for healers, but I'm not sure since I have yet to unlock even one. However, this is also a point to which I believe FF14 is not that beginner friendly. So let us start the second section of this video. While these tools and text boxes exist, meaning that the dev team definitely showed the intention of helping new players, some of these tools such as the beginner tip website was not quite literally in the player's face when being introduced, at least not that I can remember of, and thus players can easily miss them or not know how much they have worked on the website or how much information that they can reap from the website. And secondly, since a lot of the mechanics are introduced through text box on the screen, a player can easily choose to ignore it or skip it under different circumstances. For instance, you may be in the middle of doing something or even just in the middle of your train of thoughts and then a text box suddenly pop up telling you how to do ABC. Are you really going to sit there and read all of them? You probably should, to be honest, but also it is completely understandable if you choose to just skip that particular text box. However, there is no guarantee as to if the content that the player just chose to skip is important or not. In a personal case, I skipped through the text box introducing Limit Break or whatever that form was. I really don't remember how they introduced the mechanic, but anyway, I skipped it, which caused me to not know how alpha Dragoon as a job really is due to its LB3 for a very long time. But Squareface, this is technically not the game's fault. The tools are there for you. Yes, I would agree, but I would also argue that to put information, especially the more important ones behind skippable content, is not necessarily the most efficient way to introduce these mechanics to players, especially new players. So good for you if you have read all the text boxes when they pop, But for players like me who have chose to maybe skip the box here and there due to one reason or the other, we might have straight up missed key information regarding the game that we may need to learn the hard way in the future or through future guides. Secondly, the sheer amount of things that exist in FF14. Yes, the game does start really slow and do at least make an effort in addressing the problems that a beginner may have, but the sheer amount of things that a player can do in FF14 made the game to be near impossible to be fully explained to a new player, and can be quite overwhelming for the players. I, for one, for the longest time, even now a little bit, feel like whenever I learn a new thing about the game, I still have 100 more to learn. Is this a bad thing? Not at all. It just shows how vibrant and diverse the game is, but someone who has never played an MMO before, is it to a degree a little bit daunting? Also yes, perhaps a mixed feeling of being overwhelmed and excited. But the sense of dread has always been there, at least for me. Things such as hunts, gold saucer and challenge log were often locked behind quests that unless a player see others do it or happen to do those quests in particular, then would never find out about them. Watching a FF14 that is not targeted specifically for new players at the beginning of my journey felt like they are spitting out another language. And it certainly does not help that many people tend to use the abbreviated version of many in-game terms, which may cause further confusion for the players. In the end, or nowadays, I am comfortable with my knowledge of the game with the understanding that I still have a million things to learn, but it certainly took a while for me to adopt this way of thinking. And finally, we arrive at perhaps the most will-be controversial thing that I will say today, the length of the story. Before I start, let me just let you know that to me, FF14's story is the best story that I have ever played in my entire gamer career and has almost single-handedly made it the greatest video game of all time for me. But just like I said in the video discussing why I would not recommend FF14 despite how much I like the game, a reason behind the success of its story is also unironically what makes this game not necessarily accessible for beginners, which is the length of the story. FF14's story essentially feels like 5 large single-player RPG games being bundled into one. This length allowed for a narrative unlike anything that I have witnessed, but also as it has piled on top of one another for the past 10 years, it has reached the point where if a new player is to join or start today, that player is essentially starting a 10-year worth of work. It is like a high but also magnificent mountain that you are starting to climb. I don't really know how long will a quote-unquote average gamer spend on a video game per week, but let's just say 10 hours. FF14's story from the start to finish is at the minimum 300 hours, and that's assuming that the players will not do anything at all except for the story and reading all the dialogues and watching all the cutscenes. So it will take at least 30 weeks or 7 to 8 months to just finish the story. And in between stories, we got really fascinating content such as relics, extremes, savages, ultimates, among numerous others. I don't know about you, but it is honestly a pretty demanding thing to ask from a player to spend more than half a year on just the story of a game while doing nothing else in a game that has so much else to offer. Now obviously a good tip is for any beginners is to just adopt the mentality of to take the story a bit by bit and really enjoy it at a slower pace. However, not all players wish to take things necessarily slow. They may wish to accomplish content in a faster pace, or God forbid, may just not really care about the story in particular that much. They may be more interested in content such as raids and trials, to which the best among those are locked behind finishing the main story, the 300-hour grind. The pure length of the story may simply drive new players or even just potential new players away. However, to me, FF14 in the end is still a beginner-friendly game. Why? Because of one thing, its community. Objectively speaking, FF14's community has won 2 consecutive Best Community Awards back-to-back as of now, and subjectively speaking, I have never encountered such a wholesome community. Before I discuss how this community can objectively make FF14 beginner-friendly, let me touch base upon the personal side of things, which will require a bit of context. I have been a part of really just one community and with another one only so briefly. The first one was League of Legends, and the second was For Honor. Yes, two communities both known for their toxicity and are obviously stark contrast to FF14's community's reputation. But toxicity aside, what really makes FF14 feels different to me is how it almost feels like the players enjoy the game to a significant degree, or at least in the majority of the time. That the game does not mainly thrive off of negativities. Using League's community as an example, I can guarantee you that at least 7 out of 10 videos posted about League are just about how bad the game is or how broken certain things are, or at least will mention these things if the title of the video is not completely about those things. It felt like being negative toward the game is the norm, and to hate or sarcastically joke about it is what the player base does. For FF14 on the other hand, while not all the videos are about how good the game is, the general vibe of the community is positive, and they discuss how they appreciate certain things that the game offers. Even the memes are generally just funny, not maliciously funny. When I first joined the community, it almost felt off. It felt off to be positive about the game after so many godforsaken years, and it almost felt wrong to enjoy a game. A small example entails that after each match, a lot of the players would type TYFP or thank you or just some positive messages instead of hoping the other guy or his family bad wishes or GG easy or things like that. While League's community is bad due to a lot of inherent things that the game has, such as being way more competitive between players and players than Final Fantasy XIV, a large portion of the negativity is caused, or in my opinion, is caused by the relationship between the dev team, especially the game balancing team's decision, and the players. FF14's dev team's relationship with the fanbase, well, this video pretty much summarizes it. The healthy relationship really promotes a general upbeat vibe for the players and make the players feel that they are not wasting their lives in playing the game. Then, objectively speaking, FF14's community can functionally make the game more beginner-friendly to pretty much any beginners. Aside from all the people willing to do beginner tutorials on essentially anything in the game, so in an infinite amount of videos or tutorials to learn from, the people in-game are helpful as well. I will always appreciate how when I was entering my first dungeon in the game, I struggled to find a party for 2 days straight, mainly because I had my window set to 4K, so I cannot really see the key for party finder, so I could not start a duty. Out of desperation, I stood outside of the dungeon place and started waving at random players who were just passing by, asking if they can initiate the dungeon for me. And literally the second group I talked to said, sure, let's do it. And after we finished the first dungeon, they followed up by saying, hey, you have a couple more dungeons right after this, and it may be hard to get a party for as well. We will wait at the dungeon location for you and just let us know when you are ready to go. So I cleared all the beginner dungeons in just one go. And I don't believe I am in the minority. A lot of people have had good experiences with the community, and those helps were much needed for any beginners. To make them feel a sense of community and that they can always find help one way or the other through this community. So here you go. Even with the existence of points that aren't really beginner players friendly, the game ultimately, I feel like, is still beginner friendly, mainly carried by its phenomenal community. Does this mean that I will recommend FF14 to just about anyone? No, because I do think you will need a certain amount of dedications that you will be willing to give before starting. But do I like the game and I had a good experience with the game as a beginner? Hell yeah! Do you agree or do you don't? Or have I missed something that you wish to share? Let me know in the comment, but as of now, thanks for watching, leave a like or comment if you enjoyed the video, and peace out.